So I wonder if you can remember a mountaintop experience in your life. A moment when you never wanted to leave. Maybe a vacation, right? You didn't want to go home. Dan and I were in Italy when we got married. I never wanted to come home. You know, they talk about a runner's high. People just want to keep running because it's the state of euphoria that they get in. I wonder what comes to mind when you think about a mountaintop experience. We often talk about that in relation to a religious experience, right? Some of you maybe remember a youth retreat where there was a conversion experience, or maybe when you were older. And you felt that God was really close. And you just wanted your life to be like that forever. So I guess it's not surprising, is it, to hear Peter say, let's just build some tiny homes. We'll just get snug as a bug in a rug here. This was truly a mountaintop experience for Peter. The story picks up after our lesson from last week. Jesus had begun his ministry, but he had just come off the temptations. And here's Peter again. Jesus, you aren't going to die. The biggest temptation of all for Jesus not to follow his path, not to follow his purpose, not to continue on that path into death. And then that reminder again. I love you. Don't worry. I'm pleased with you. God's presence in Jesus' life. Those disciples must have thought, let's just stay here and not risk that whole death thing. And then to see their heroes besides. This mountain is full of light. You might remember Moses. He also went up into the mountain after he led the Israelites out of Egypt, spoke with God, got what we call the 10 Commandments, what I like to call the 10 best ways to live. And when he came back down the mountain, the people said, tell him to put a veil on. He's too bright and shiny. We can't look at him. And then their hero, Elijah, the one who called out those who were unjust, the one who proclaimed judgment on the wicked oppressors, the one who raised the widow's son, and the one who, in the end, didn't even have to die. Hopped on a chariot, a brilliant blaze of glory, and went flying off to meet God. There's their heroes, and Jesus is among them, and it's all bright and shiny. Who wouldn't want to stay in that place? But Mark gives us a clue about the real meaning of this story. He starts that 9th chapter by saying 6 days later. That's Mark's shorthand for, look at the story just previous to get the real message here. And so we see Peter tempting Jesus to stray from his path. And we see then Jesus' teachings. In order to follow me, you have to take up your cross. This isn't about bearing the burdens that life hands you. We talked about that. Life's not fair. We walk together and bear one another's burdens when life throws them at us. This is about intentionally taking up your cross. This is about understanding how God has uniquely prepared you through your experiences, through your unique personality, to be God's presence in the world. And oftentimes, No, I would dare say always. When we are God's presence in the world, we call out the powers. We confront evil and injustice. When we follow God's path for us, we risk tomatoes being thrown or worse. And believe me, Jesus knew. He was not the only one crucified. You might remember the stories from your history class. The Romans, like that, would hang someone on a cross. Especially someone who was inciting these pesky Jews. At one time, the record has it that 2,000 were hanging on crosses for all to see what happens when you confront the Romans. Jesus knew death was coming. And he tried to teach his disciples what liberation meant. It didn't mean avoiding death. It didn't mean trying to get out of that circumstance. It meant going into it. And we do it every day, right? We let go every day at the end of the day, to a day. Well spent or not so well spent. Every choice we make is between this and that. And when we choose this, we let go of that. It dies to us. Cells slough off. They say we're a new person, completely new person every 7 years. We experience death every day in our lives. What are we so afraid of? We survive. We experience God's presence with us. That's the message of Jesus. Don't be afraid. Face death. Go into it. The Easter message is that when the seed goes into the ground and dies, it comes up a new plant, a new life. Death does not have the final word. Oh, but I'd get ahead of myself. It can seem like life is full of death and despair. There's a mental illness that we all feel to one degree or another, where the highs are really high and the lows are really low, and those who have been diagnosed with manic depression don't want the treatment because they like the highs at the expense of the lows, but the highs are fleeting. We know that from our experience. The highs are a foreshadowing of that day when all will be made well. But for today, they're just a moment. They're just a mountaintop moment. And then they're gone. You notice that Jesus doesn't reprimand Peter, at least not in Mark's version of the story. He just takes the next step on the journey, back down the mountain, into the city, on to his destination, facing whatever may come. That's the practice during Lent, to not shy away from those difficult times. The Olympic athlete trains hard for months and years. Think about childbirth. Before that new life can come, there has to be pain. It's not to be feared. It's part of life. Let's continue on our Lenten journey.